So today we have got an amazing guest on our podcast, and I'd love to introduce her by name, but she knows I can never quite pronounce it correctly. I can do the Eriona bit, but I can't do the last bit. So, Eriona, tell us your last name.
So my last name is Bajrakurtaj, but Carl, you did say it once on stage correctly. So I'm just saying you
Oh,
could
wow.
give another go.
There we go. So, I guess if you get enough monkeys in a room, they will knock out Shakespeare eventually.
Yeah,
Eriona, it is fantastic to have you on this podcast. We've worked closely together, both within the ACCA's practitioners panel and outside. I've seen what you're doing. I've heard a bit of your story before, and I know the audience will love to hear about it. So, first things first, tell me, who is Eriona?
what a great question. That's probably one of the hardest questions that I ever get.
Oh, you wait. There'll be a few.
What do I say? So Eriona is someone who had a dream when she was younger to grow up to be weirdly in boardrooms, in business, high flying, successful. That was kind of her dream. And education is something that she absolutely loved and thrived on, and that's the dream she followed. So she qualified as an accountant, running her own practice, also a property developer, not something she thought she was going to do, but and went to unis that she only dreamed of, but there was a dream and she reached it. And now she's a mum and enjoying juggling all of this in one.
Fantastic. Well, that's an amazing summary, but I think it actually undersells you and your practice as well. So, what I'd like to do is to give the listeners and viewers, if they're watching by video, to give them a bit of a frame from which they can understand the subjects that we're going to talk about today. It would be
Yeah,
really good to know about the history of Majors Accounts. So, this being a family business and a fantastic story, not only behind the name, but also behind the journey.
yes, absolutely. So Majors Accounts was started up in 2006 by my dad. I was 13 at the time, and it was a business. When we first got our first office, I say our because I was there from day one. We had two filing cabinets, and there were literally just two folders in one of the drawers. And we were just like, well, how much are we going to charge these people? Because that's all the clients we ever had, right? But through word of mouth, the business grew really quickly. I grew up with the business. I was a part-time bookkeeper, weekends, every Saturday and Sunday, because we were open 7 days for many years. And then over time, I started studying ACCA whilst working full time, and I qualified. And then I decided to take over.
Okay,
And
so I'm going to pause you there. I'm going to pause you
yes,
there because
yes,
what I want to do is to really paint a picture of how this practice started,
yeah,
and also I think that there'll be many of us who are of a slightly older vintage. Eviona, you're a young whippersnapper compared to some of us, and you've actually had quite a unique insight into how firms work despite your young age. So it'll be really good if you could talk a little bit about, how your dad started the firm, and the way that it went from being just the seed of an idea, to where it was at the point that you took over.
yeah, absolutely. So he was actually working, my dad was working in a finance department in a council. And we had some family members who needed to do their tax returns. The first time that they were doing it, to be honest, and they didn't know what they needed to do. And my dad said, "Yeah, I'll have a look at it because he's in finance." So they said, "You should know how to do this." So he had a look at it and said, "Yeah, I can do this for you." Found out that because of the industry they were in, they were actually due a lot of money back. And when he gave them that money back, they were shocked. They'd never seen this before, right? So then word
Okay.
started to spread. Um, One told another, and that's how it kind of grew. And he was doing this, mostly tax returns, after work and working full time whilst also studying as well, his accountancy qualification. ACCA actually it was at the time. And it got to the point where he couldn't do both. So he made a decision, do I go all in or just give up on the idea and focus on his finance career because he'd just got a promotion in a job that
Sure.
was a dream job at the time,
So,
right? So it
so
was
he was. he was at that critical tipping point that
Exactly.
many people have, whether they're in practice and they decide to start on their own, or indeed, as we can say, I guess we can say in industry, although it's a council, it's not quite the same.
Yeah.
But you hit that tipping point of weighing up, oh, can I take the risk? And there are so many factors far beyond the financials as well.
There's so many things. And obviously he had a family with three kids that he had to consider
Yeah,
and take
and
care
and I
of.
was I was going to ask Eriona, how old were you at that point?
So that was just, yeah, just before I turned 13.
Okay, and if you can cast your mind back to your 13-year-old self and tell me to stick my nose out of it if you want, but I'm a curious guy. I want to ask these
Yeah.
questions. As a 13-year-old, did you know what was going on in mum and dad's world at that time? And how did you feel about it?
I knew that there was a big decision that was happening that we were kind of, my family were looking into. One thing that my dad always did, my parents raised us in that every family decision, every discussion about finances, good, bad, whatever it might be, decisions we made were always done in front of us with the
Okay.
idea of us learning that in life you're going to come across all kinds of things and start to think, well, how would we overcome this? What kind of solutions could we have? So we were very much in on exactly what was happening. Now, whether we understood it as deeply then as obviously now, probably not as much, but at the time,
Do you know that is a staggering lesson, and
obviously,
I want the audience to take away, whether they're parents, grandparents, or not even thinking about that side of life at the moment. Yeah, that's a fantastic way of helping the next generation, just to have some financial literacy, but also to understand the realities of the world. Because as parents, sometimes we can want to protect little ears from everything and
yeah.
wrap them up in cotton wool and so on. And Fiona, you and I have both been there. But the reality is that actually the real world is the real world. I
Mm.
know this is a complete tangent. We are going to get back to the story in just a moment, but that's a lesson I'd love everyone to take away. So, you were party to the discussions, but not necessarily understanding what was going on. Did you have any idea that probably the day afterwards you would end up being the employee?
I actually didn't. I didn't think that it would get there because up until that point, I wasn't helping out. It was just my dad who was doing the tax returns from
Sure.
home, and that was it. I never thought that I would, one, start working that early. I didn't really fully understand what he did. My dad went to work and did something with numbers, and that was
Mm.
it. Um, so at the time, I didn't. But obviously, when they decide, and one thing that I will say that my dad is very lucky in that he had my mum to support him, who you need someone that can give you that push, right? He was umming and ahhing and thinking, I think I need to, but I'm not sure because it's a big risk. But she just came and said, well, what's the worst that could happen?
It's so
Give it a
so
go.
important, so important because particularly in a romantic relationship or spouse, life partner, however that relationship is for you. The reality is that when you start a business, or indeed just embark on a new journey within your existing business, the very worst thing that can happen to you is a year and a half down the line when you're running out of steam, motivation has gone, and you hear
Yeah,
those words, I told you so. It's the
exactly.
worst thing you can imagine.
Exactly. And my mom was always with everything. She would always say to him, "You're the one that was successful up until this point. There are going to be ups and downs, but you're the same person that can make this a success as well. And you're never going to know unless you try it. So we're all in. We're here to support you. We'll do it all together and just see where it goes." And I think that obviously gives you huge confidence boost to think, okay, I'm just going to go in it and give this a go. And he did, got the office, left his job, and everyone was like, "You're crazy. You've just got a promotion. Your dream job that he'd been chasing for so many years, and you're giving it up straight
Mm.
away. Like, have you lost your mind?" And he said, "Well, I have to give this a go, see where it goes. If it goes well, then great. If not, then he could go back into industry or get another job." But he got his office. Obviously, the first year it was how do we get clients? He had a small client base, But with tax returns, they're once a year, so you're hoping they'll come back because they do move quite quickly. But then it was looking at what about businesses, not just sole traders? How can we help businesses so we have regular income to pay the rent for the office and rent for the house and food and everything else? And I started pretty much immediately with my mum. I mean, all of us every Saturday and Sunday looked like getting up, going to the office, staying there all day, and then in the afternoon would go do like food shopping or something like that.
Sure,
But
sure, sure.
so we'd spend the whole time together. My mum was there, so my mum was helping as the admin um, with anything. She had no accounting background whatsoever. But over the years, she learned how to submit the tax returns, how to do the payroll, how to do CIS, how to do confirmation statements, literally everything, registering people for self assessment. But that was the support that he needed initially because we didn't have money to employ other people.
Of course.
So he was teaching her, and then I was there. I started off with Excel paperwork. I say very traditional. Obviously, I wasn't writing things down in the big red books like they used to be, but I was doing everything from scratch manually. In a way, I think that helped me at the time. One, because I didn't actually understand what I was doing, and my dad had a very unique way of training me.
Okay. Go on,
Just,
tell me more. Tell me more.
just me, no
How
one
did the
else.
ma yeah, how did the major train you? And by the way, the name
Yeah,
majors as well.
I need to give some background on
Yes.
the major. So majors, he named it Majors Accounts because he was a major in the army in Albania, and he was a very successful man in Albania. Right at 28, he was a major that the youngest major that had ever been in Albania at that time. Super smart, everything else. But with me, he always had very high expectations, not just with me, but all kids, all of us kids. Um, and he again wanted to teach us life lessons. So his way of training me, none of the other team, whoever came next, had a very different treatment. But with me, it was here's some paperwork. I think the first thing I did, he gave me was some bank statements and said, here's some bank statements. Here's Excel. Do it. I was like, do what? He said, figure it out. I was like, figure what out? Can I have a clue as to what I'm supposed to be doing? And he was like, well, what would you do if I wasn't here? I was like, I'd probably be at home watching Tracy Beaker or something on TV, not here. But that which at the time I hated. There were a lot of tears because I was just like, I don't want to be here. I couldn't understand what I was doing. But it meant, okay, so I've got some bank statement, I've got Excel, and I've got Google. I know this is an accounting firm. So let me just search up what would an accounting firm do with bank statements. So I went through trying to figure it out, and it took me probably a few weekends, right? And I finally got to a stage where I said, I'm happy. Here you go, check it. He came, quick glance, highlighted all of it, delete. I was just like, what did you do? You can't, what did I do wrong? He said, figure it out. So there I go,
Wow.
start again,
Wow.
going through. Now, obviously, as I said, it was very hard at the time, but it has taught me so much that in life, when someone says, can you do this? I'm like, yeah,
Mm.
I will figure
And
it out.
work out how later. And you
Yeah,
have to think yourself lucky as well. I'm casting my mind back, and clearly you're of a slightly later generation than me, but also a generation that's now seeing the next evolution.
yeah,
Because the Eriona sat here today is probably thinking, "Oh my word, it would have been amazing had I been, quite a few years younger and had ChatGPT to do all this for me. It would have saved me possibly a couple of weekends to watch Tracy Beaker." But then
yeah,
there's me, who's sat here thinking Google. Like, I don't remember Google when I was training.
yeah,
So I know from my background, I started at very much the cusp of the internet and computerization, where I went into practice in 1997. Yes, I am that old. I was only a youngster, but in 97, and the challenge
mm,
back then was that often most of the people within a practice, particularly the partners, with all respect, didn't really know how to use computers.
yeah,
So there was a huge tech journey ahead of them. Um, how was your old man with it? You know, was he using things like Excel and so on, or was it quite antiquated processes?
At the time, I would say it was probably standard, what you would expect for an accounting practice. So
Sure.
Excel, we used Sage for some of the like larger practices, or maybe for the payroll. Um, Not too bad for where technology was at that point,
Do
I
you
would.
mind me asking what year that was?
So that would have been from 2006 to when I took over, to around 2018 or so.
Got it, got it, got it. So
The
2006
full
when it
kind of system.
started. You see, I've always told never to ask a woman their age, but I now know the age.
Yeah,
But
I don't know.
2006 when you started, as you say, many firms, there was embryonic online tools and so on at that point.
Yeah,
Things like Zero released the year afterwards, and you had cash
yeah,
flow and so on. So there were some cutting edge tools, but the reality for
yeah,
99.9% of firms, and indeed the people within the firms, were, as you say, Excel, possibly off the shelf packages for preparing accounts and tax and
exactly.
so on, but a lot of manual, I guess, manual fixes along the way. And if truth be told, the Excel spreadsheets were often replicating what a big red cash book did.
Exactly. Exactly. Like, it was super manual.
So, you started at a very young age
Yeah,
and effectively, certainly from teenage years upwards, grew up with the business.
exactly.
You say that, you went to university, so you would have, by virtue of my amazing skills of deduction here, you would
Yeah.
have also gone to sixth form as well. That would have been quite intense.
Yes.
Over that time, we won't dwell on this too much, but sixth form university, did you also work within the business or did you take some time out?
I worked non-stop.
Got it.
Uh,
And with
straight.
that, did you study accountancy at school, at sort of school and university, or did you think, oh my word, I've had enough of this. I want to study leisure and tourism or David Beckham studies or whatever.
To be honest, when I was younger, I really wanted to either go into law or banking.
Sure,
And I think the time that I had spent within the business and learning and getting that experience, it was kind of a no-brainer that I would go into accountancy. And after sixth form, I had a place to go to uni to study accountancy. And at that point, I stopped, and that was my crossroads. What do I do? Do I go into uni and do a 3-year degree and then go into ACCA? Because I always knew if I was going to study accountancy, my goal was to qualify with ACCA. Or do I just skip those 3 years and go straight into studying ACCA? Now, at that time, the degrees weren't as aligned with the
okay,
ACCA syllabus. So if I'd have done 3 years at uni, it would have been just three exemptions out of 14 exams with ACCA.
sure,
So in my mind, I was like, at A level, we were doing 3, 4 subjects. They were really hard. I could do the first three exams in the first 3 months. So I would have saved nearly 3 years of my life for the same amount, right? So I decided to do that when I wasn't studying ACCA because I did the full-time class option.
sure,
And any day that I wasn't in class, I was in the office. And as I said, we were open 7 days a week. So if studying was 3 days, 4 days, I was in the office. And I continued that until I qualified. Now, in that time, I also had my daughter. I was very young when I had her. Sorry,
and
one.
that must have been a curveball when it comes to studying, working, and being flat out. But an amazing curveball to have.
Oh,
Okay,
it
Erion.
was it was amazing. Do you know what? I think with my daughter, it helped spur me on because it's not an easy qualification is
No.
to complete, right? But having her, I used to ask my mum to bring her to the exam halls, and she'd be going up and down the Excel whilst I was in the exam halls with her, and knowing that I get to look forward to when I come out, seeing her face, and she was obviously really excited. But
Oh,
hopefully,
love this.
showing her what it means to work hard.
Okay, so I want to take a little bit of a step away from the studying and actually talk a little bit now about the, I guess, the evolution of Eriona as you started your career in accountancy, sort of full on, your adult career in accountancy, post full time education. You'd already had heaps of work experience, more than most people could imagine. But also, you were an adult. You were, deciding where you go in life. You were a parent, as you mentioned, and in that position, did you find that there was any tensions, sort of within the family business, and how did you cope with those as they came up?
It wasn't an easy journey, I have to say. And also, we were living together for most of that. So it meant that the conversations never ended.
Sure.
It could be whilst we were in bed. My dad would come to my bed and say, "Oh, have you done this?" I was like, "I'll do it tomorrow." He said, "Can you just do it now?"
Yeah.
So I was literally in bed and like completing some things. But I really wanted something more, right? When I qualified, and the business was very traditional in the way that it was working. It had quite a few clients already. We had a team of maybe 6 or 7 at that point, and I just thought I would love to do something more than what we were doing. It was almost like a conveyor belt service.
Sure.
So we'd prepared accounts, tax returns, here it is, see you next year. A little bit of advice, obviously, within the conversations, but it was just deadline focused, and I wanted to do something, and I knew that there must be more than this. And I went through and started to transfer our filing system that we had. At this point, we had a lot of files, a lot of clients, and transferring them onto an Excel spreadsheet as a database because we didn't have a database. And at that time, I my dad was like saying to me, if I wanted to know which person was a director of a company without having to go through a company's house, he'd say, just ask me. I know all of
Yeah.
these things off the top of my head. Now, his memory was amazing because we had like 500
Mm.
clients, multiple shareholders, directors, and so on. And he would remember all of them, which great, but that's not something that you can use to scale the business. And he always thought
100%. It's a bottleneck, and
it's
you
a
might
massive
have scaled
bottleneck.
to 5,000 clients. You might have an exceptional photographic memory, but it's a bottleneck.
It's a massive bottleneck, but also I think he was just so proud of where he'd got to because he never thought that he would get here at that point, that he thought, well, I've reached more than I ever thought, so we're never going to need it because we don't need any more clients than this because I can remember everything, so it's fine. But I wanted to reach for higher. I knew we could
Sure.
do so much more. So
And
part of
if I could just ask a quick clarifying question,
yeah,
if that's
yeah,
okay. So clearly there was, we'll come to talk about the journey of buying out and then the transformation that you've been on. But at this stage, because I think this will be relevant not just for family businesses, but
yeah,
for all partnerships of all kinds,
yeah.
whether corporate, traditional partnership, and so on.
Mhm.
Um, you obviously knew deep down that there was perhaps a misalignment of vision,
Yeah,
but you could see it going far further. Your dad, quite rightly, was very proud of the foundations that he had built. That, with all respect, somebody who can take it further probably couldn't build to that stage because
yeah.
we have different, different skill sets and so on.
Mm.
So you had this misalignment of vision. I want to ask, in fact, two clarifying questions off of it. Number one, did that permeate into the business and cause any challenges that you had to overcome? And if so, how? And then secondly, did you, I presume you did have a very plain conversation of something needs to change, but how did you reach that point and how did you go about that?
What helped me personally was when I took over and I qualified with the ACCA. Obviously, I took over a majority share in the business. So I kind of used that to my advantage. And I decided to start implementing some changes. But I think what really, I was also a little bit scared of what I was imagining and
Sure.
thinking, maybe this is something that, am I biting off more than I can chew? Is this realistic or not? And although I'd been thinking about it, at that time, there was a lot of conversation about making tax digital in, well, the first time anyone heard it, right? So
Yes.
for me, it was more of a, what does this mean? The conversations were becoming a bit more intense, and that a lot more people were talking about it. So I thought it's probably time I find out exactly what it is and what our obligations are for our clients and what they need to do. And in that process, I went to a conference, an accounting conference, which at the time I thought, what would you do in an accounting conference? I'd never been. I never when you're in practice, you don't talk to anyone else, not even other accountancy practice owners, because of fear of them stealing clients or stealing your edge or whatever it might be. So I didn't know anything outside of our own business. And when I heard that there was an accounting conference, I thought, so is that just a bunch of people standing around talking about, so how much tax has your client paid? I saved them this much. Literally, that's all. I couldn't think of what else it could be. And when I
Sure.
went and I saw one, a different world full of tech. That was the first time I really understood what fintech was, because it was a buzzword that was thrown around all the time, but realistically I didn't know exactly what it meant or what that looked like. But secondly, accountants talking to each other, sharing their stories, first of all, so you can connect and say, oh my gosh, I had that too. So it's not just me. I thought I was just the worst at this, and I thought I was the only one with these problems. So being able to connect with somebody else on the same level and then start sharing, be comfortable to start sharing ideas of, well, have you tried this? I've done that. And there were talks of people sharing best practice of what you should do. That blew my mind. I was like, I don't
Got it.
understand where we've been hiding all this time.
Yes. Yes. The reality is, though, as we know, 99% of firms don't necessarily know what's out there, what's next door.
So when I came back, as I mentioned, I'd gone to this conference thinking that I want to learn about making tax digital. That was it. I didn't think that I was going to get what I actually saw, what I got from it. So I came back to the office and like super excited. I was like, this is what I've been looking for. This is the thing that I want us to make a change. And now I can see that vision I had of how the business, how I wanted it to become. I could finally understand what the route was, which path I needed to take to get there. So as it was now clear in my mind, I could articulate it. So I went back to the office. I was like, guys, I have just figured out what we need to do. There's a whole world out there that we did not know existed. And what we need to do is X, Y, Z. And I listed out all the changes we needed to make. And again, I was so, so excited. Probably the first time anyone's ever seen me that passionate about something. And everyone was skeptical. And for 6 months, all I did was have nice conversations with people because I really wanted them to understand what I was saying so they could come on this journey by themselves without
Got
me
it.
forcing them. And 6 months went by, and every time I'd have that conversation, because it just seemed like it was so unbelievable compared to where we were, in how traditional we were, full of paperwork. And our most advanced tech was Excel and maybe one or two other desktop packages, but that was it. Um, they just kept saying, "Oh, we've got deadlines this month. Can we push it to next month?" And 6 months went by, and I thought, I've had enough. I felt like every second that went by was me losing out on what our business could be.
I,
And when I
I
left
can
that conference,
empathize
oh,
it so much. You probably felt like you were trying to put your foot down and someone else was putting the brakes on.
literally, but I felt when I left that conference, I thought we were so behind. I thought we're losing so much time. I wanted to get started straight away and have 6 months go by and nothing's happened when I've seen what could happen. That's worse. If I hadn't have seen it, I don't know what I don't know, right? Is what it is. But I've seen at this point what could be, and it's not getting there. We're not moving. I just couldn't handle it anymore. So I sat down with my parents. I said, this is the vision. And I gave them a crazy vision, which I didn't fully believe myself, but I had to feel like if I say it out loud, to convince myself to believe it so that we can get somewhere closer. And I said to my dad,
Sure.
I'm going to run this business from my mobile anywhere in the world. I've decided I will achieve that. And he was like, come on, that's not going to happen. I was like, I'm going to do it, but we're going to start by converting everything we have into digital systems. Once we're at digital systems, we'll train the team. Once we'll train the team, we'll train the clients. Then we get them used to different kind of service. Once they're used to a different kind of service, they will want more. We can do so much more for them. It will free up our time. So I'm explaining this whole journey that I had planned in my head. I didn't know where I was going to start, if I'm being honest, but I had a rough idea of what I was going to do. And I think the more I said that, I had to say this, we had this conversation quite a few times, right? And it got to the point where he said, okay, give it a go. Start with like one or two things and see where that goes. In his mind, knowing that this is not really going to, get anywhere, but she feels like she needs to do this. I'll just let her get it out of her system.
Yeah, sure.
So that's how it started. And it meant that I needed to go out to the team and announce to them, because there was also that, okay, Riona's now qualified and we're all working under her license now, no longer my dad's, but he's the original number one. So who do we listen to now? We have
Mm,
I'm saying we're going to go digital, and they're saying we have deadlines. So they go to my dad, and he says, "Yeah, just tell her we've got deadlines. We'll do it next month." So like, oh, cool. He's giving us the go ahead, so we're fine. Which then meant for them, they started to work out who to go to for what to benefit them, right?
yes.
Which is not helpful, because then if I'd have said something, my dad said, "Don't worry, do the opposite," and they said, "Well, your dad said so," you know. And I was raised to respect your elders, so I had to like bite my tongue. But I went to him and said privately, individually, not in front of the team, I was like, we're going to do this and I need your support. If they come to you and you tell them this, by the way, I will say to them, it means nothing. I'm the one that makes the final decision. And it got to the point where I kept having that so many times, and I was like, guys, announcement. If you come to me and say one more time, oh, but your dad said it's okay, you may as well leave. I am the one that is making the final decision. I've given you instructions. If you have difficulty, tell me how to do it, but don't give me the excuse of, I asked him and he said it's okay, just do it next time. I think at that point, that set the tone for the team. Everything switched. Even those that were super against what I was saying, I literally just said to them, you may as well leave. So their
Sure.
jobs are at risk, which was a bit dramatic, but it was the only way to get them to understand that this is where the business is headed.
Absolutely, because it's a huge culture shift,
Yeah,
and what you had to do was take a business that operated in one way, one shape, but also with a different hierarchy,
yeah,
and and engineer it to a point that actually allowed you to achieve your vision rather than being frustrated. Because let's be honest, the other option for you, Eriona, would have been knowing there was a better way but not wanting to upset the status quo.
yeah,
And yeah, this conversation wouldn't be happening today, and your life would have gone into a very, very different path.
absolutely.
How do you feel that your parents took it at that point when there was that clear, I wouldn't say conflict, but that clear disagreement on the best way of doing things?
Oh, it was conflict. It was World War Three. That's how I'll explain it, because we went through so much, and I understand it from both sides, because my dad has built this business from nothing. We had nothing, and he's built this business and created a life of luxury compared to what we had, right? So he'd done so well, and everyone telling him, you've done amazing, and clients looking up to him, and in our community so many people looking up to him, to me coming in and threatening that, threatening
Mm,
to potentially lose everything that he built. It was super difficult for him. And I understand that. And there was a lot of friction. But I say to him, well, you raised me to be headstrong, so I'm going to push through. Whether it works or not, on paper, it seems fine, like it's going to work. But I'm just going to push through, see it to the end. Because he always said to me, if you're going to start something, you have to finish it. And during that time, I'd say a good few years, whilst I was going through and transitioning everything, he did not believe in anything anything that I was doing. Even though we were pretty digital throughout that process. But again,
Mm,
he did not believe that there was genuinely any benefit to that process. It wasn't until COVID when he saw me reviewing a set of accounts. Obviously, we were at home and I was just doing it on my laptop. And he came and sat next to me and said, "So what are you doing?" I was like, "I'm just reviewing a set of accounts." Now, he'd not seen this process that I'd put in place. And he's seen all these different softwares, figures fitting together, coming from here, there. And when I finished, he just said to me, shook my hand and said, "I'm done. I give up. I stand down. I'm not going to be your, what's the word, your blocker anymore, or not enemy, but your blocker with everything
sure.
that you were doing. Whatever you want, I'm all in from now on,"
Amazing.
which
Eriona,
was massive.
I bet that you probably felt like a huge weight was off your shoulders.
Oh,
I imagine that life probably went from being a fuzzy picture to in 4K HD, and we know what it's like. We're of a similar
yeah,
mindset. We can see the big picture, and when a blocker's removed, suddenly everything's amazing.
yeah,
Um, Listening to what you've said, I'm sure that many of the viewers and listeners will be finding that some of this resonates,
yeah,
whether they've got a practice that they've built, and there's change happening against their will. Because we can't control what goes on outside of our practices,
yeah,
or perhaps there's team members coming through the ranks. I won't necessarily say younger, but those who've seen a different way and
yeah,
really want to drive through that change. Now, these things never come about through bad intention. Nobody wants to change things for bad reasons. However, whilst everyone's got the same end view of, or we hope they've got the same end view of delivering great service, making money, etc., etc., the routes that they believe is best to get there might be different. Um, I'm mindful that some of the audience might feel that they're not as brave as you to step up,
yeah.
and perhaps aren't able to have such candid conversations. What did you learn along this process, and what would you have done differently with hindsight?
Gosh, I learned so much within this process. I think when it comes to having the guts to just go ahead and do it, I used past experiences in life as fuel. Now, not everybody has negative experiences in life, so that may alter it slightly, but I felt like I want better for myself. I have a dream and I want to achieve it, and I'm just going to give it a go. But I think that's kind of the attitude we need to have generally in life, in everything that we do, because we only get one life. So it's not that long, even though it seems that long, but it's
Oh,
not.
absolutely. We've
So
only got 4,000 weeks. We need to make our
exactly,
8-year-old self and 80-year-old self proud, blah, blah, blah. I'm a
exactly,
book full of motivational quotes if you want them.
literally, literally. But um, I think if what I would have done differently, because during this process, at the very beginning, I lost the majority of my team because they thought that I'd lost my mind and I'm going to ruin the business and this ship is sinking, so let's get out now. Um, I think on my part, what I could have done better was to better articulate my vision, to better articulate the outcome that I was hoping to have for the business and for each individual person within the business and also for our clients. I think if I'd have done that better, I probably would have had more buy-in, or there would have been clear conversations of, I understand where you're going and I understand what you want to do, but I'm at that point in my life where I don't want to learn anything new and I'm quite
Sure.
comfortable with where I am, so that the relationship would have parted a lot nicer probably at that point. Or those that were maybe trying to understand what I was doing but they didn't fully understand and they may have left almost for no reason because they didn't understand that. So I think one side, articulate; the other side, ask questions to make sure you fully know what's going on. And also, whilst I was choosing softwares, but again, it's different to now. At that point, there weren't that many people that were talking about it. There weren't that many people that were talking to each other. And software was still coming out, and there were so many new ones that not many people had so much knowledge, as much knowledge as they have now with each one, right? So I was almost guessing, well, not almost, I was guessing every step of the way, thinking, so this is what I want to do. Let's give this looks like it might fit. Give it a go. Oh, no, that doesn't work. Get rid of that, try a different one until I got to where I was. But obviously, for a team member seeing this, they probably thought, what is going on? This is just one big mess, right? Until we got to where we refined it and it was exactly what I was imagining. Um, but I think having them on that journey of what I was doing in terms of research, instead of me doing it, because I felt like this is all on me, no one believes me, so I've got to do this. I'm going to do this every step of the way, not realizing that if I'd have had their input along the way to say, well, this is probably good. Oh, have you noticed there's this feature which I may have missed because I'm so focused on maybe one particular thing and not seeing the bigger picture. If I'd have had them along with me on that decision making journey, then it may have been a very different journey. It may not have been as painful. We may have made less mistakes because
Mm.
there are more minds looking at a particular decision and considering all factors before deciding something. But I was very much in that mindset of like, I need to make decisions fast because we need to get moving. But I think if they were involved, they would have enjoyed it. They would have felt like they are a part of the future, and they would have been a lot more bought into the softwares that we were taking on as well. And they would have made them a much faster success because it did become a success, but a much faster success than the
Yeah,
first.
I'm actually going to contend that because I think one of the challenges, being of a similar mindset and looking, I describe my role as visionary. We use the visionary
Yeah,
integrator model from Gino Wickman, and I think one of the character flaws of visionaries is that we want everything done yesterday because the vision is so compelling. It's like, why can't we have that? We
yeah,
just can't see
mm,
the blockers and so on,
yeah,
and we can try to put in all of the change management tools and I try to do change on a page and try and think of what's other people's motivations and whys and blockers from their perspective. We can do all of that stuff. We can communicate more effectively. We can repeat and say it and say it and say it until we're bored.
yeah,
But the reality is that
mm,
actually sometimes change just takes time and doesn't fit some people, and
yeah.
sometimes it's actually us who have to change and accept that this is gonna be a long process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think if I was to change what I did, I would have tried this, but ultimately there are going to be some people that this is not for them.
Mm,
And it's better if that relationship ends early because they're the ones that are going to block the vision of where you're going to go, right? You need people that are bought into what you're trying to do, and that, you can try and change people's minds as much as possible, but it's not always possible. And it's being okay with that, which I think it would give a lot of people a lot of peace in
absolutely.
understanding that, sometimes these things would have to happen for a better result for all parties involved.
Of course. So I'm going to kind of step away and ask two very general questions now
Mhm.
before we go on to some questions to find out more about Eriona. So you'll be glad to hear, and I'm sure the audience will be delighted to hear, although they might not feel it right now, but delighted to hear. We're not going to go through the ins and outs of what tech to use and how to join it up and what an API is and vibe coding and all of that nonsense, because quite frankly, there's loads of that information out there. But what you've touched on around the change management piece,
Yeah.
both in your journey and the change that you went through, the change that you saw externally, and then what happened in the business, I think if we can bundle that up with the experience you've got now in helping other practices to go on this journey,
Yeah.
um, what would be the heavy hitting advice that you would give for anyone listening to this who wants to drive change through their organization, bearing in mind that they're not necessarily the child of the practitioner and coming up with the same conflicts, but they will have their own conflicts,
Of
which you'd have seen in other firms?
Yeah, I think number one, because I've spoken to so many, whether it is a family business or they're a team member who wants to make a change, but they feel like they have no space to be able to do that, or there's no green light ahead. Um, I always need to understand from them, how passionate are they about that change? How much do they believe in what they're saying? Because if they believe it, that's the fuel they need to get them through that journey. If they're half-hearted, thinking maybe, but I'm not sure, it's just not going to work, because it's not an easy process, and they will run out of steam, and it will be that thing of where you start something, you don't finish it, and you feel so much worse at the end of it, because you feel like, oh, I failed. But in reality, it's because you weren't fully believing what you're saying. I think if someone has that, they can literally, with some techniques, achieve exactly what they want, no matter who is above them trying to stop them or block it or slow it down.
Got it. And yes, for last question, before we go into the personal questions, ACCA, you've been a prominent member of the practitioner community, and we worked alongside each other as chair and deputy chair practitioners panel. You're now chair. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It would be great to hear from you the benefits that being such an active member of the ACCA community has brought to you in your practice as well.
Oh, so many, I have to say, apart from being able to connect with other practitioners of the same kind of mindset, all going through the same thing, that there is a community there that's available for you to access. You don't have to go looking for people. It's there ready. As I mentioned, same mindset. They've got the same problems. That they have also got the same solutions available for each other, which, helping each other out, which has been absolutely amazing.
Eriona, we're going to go on to some rapid fire questions now. It's
Okay.
been an amazing conversation, and we're going to do a wrap up of what I see are the key takeaways towards the end. But first things first, what advice would you give your younger self?
Oh, advice I'd give my younger self is keep going. Keep that
Keep going.
determination and that fire alive, because that's what's going to give you all the success you could ever dream of.
Fantastic. Next up, and you've probably been asked this before. I know you've done a few podcasts. If you were to host a dinner party, you know exactly where this is going. Three
Hmm.
guests, they can be fictional, they can be real people, dead or alive. Who would you invite?
Number one, I would have my dad there, because
Fantastic.
although we have had we've been through all kinds of things, I have never come across with someone with that much knowledge and insight, and the way that he sees the world. There is always
Got it.
golden nugget there.
So
Uh,
when you ask what wine we're having, and yeah, you're saying red and he says white, are you gonna tell people not to ask him?
well, to be honest, he's pretty good at wine as well, so I'd probably trust his
Fantastic.
judgment. Uh,
Fantastic. So we used Major's knowledge.
yeah,
Excellent.
you
So you
have
got your
to.
old man.
Oh gosh, who else would I have? This is so hard. Um, I would love to have someone who is probably not in our profession, maybe younger, inexperienced,
Okay.
for driving questions that we may not have thought.
Sure.
I feel like that makes the conversation, but who that would be,
So someone who would really benefit from the space, but also would provoke the conversation in the
exactly,
right way to help them benefit. Got
exactly,
it. And who
exactly.
would be number three?
Ah, number three, Carl, you got me. Someone who has traveled a lot and seen the world and can share wisdoms from different cultures. Who that would be?
I'll let you stew on that one, but we've got a good
Mm.
idea of a mix. We
Yeah,
got
yeah, yeah.
we got the industry profession experience, we've got the external life experience, and we've got somebody to make it really easy for you who's going to ask the questions. So you just sit back and soak up. Love it.
Not necessarily easy, because if they're asking questions, that means that we're having to use this a lot.
100%. Next up, what is the best purchase you've made for about 50, up to 50 quid? So it could be a pound, could be up to £50 that's changed your life in some way, whether personally, professionally.
I mean, personally, I've loved the DJI mics and sets. They have made a huge difference to what I'm doing, when it comes to being able to communicate effectively through social media. So it's made a difference. Now, whether that's, you know, good enough. I don't know, but it's made a huge difference.
No, honestly, it's amazing because a lot of us worry about camera quality and so on, but actually, when it comes to content, we know that audio quality is far more important than the visuals. So, 100%. Next up, what is your go-to source of information? So it could be your favorite book, it could be podcasts or websites you visit or so on. What would you recommend that everyone checks out?
To be honest, the LinkedIn platform for me, it makes a huge difference. It may not be that I get full information from that, but it sparks the ideas of, okay, I need to look into this. Um, but there are a lot of people sharing information that is super useful and is enough sometimes for what you need. But because it's so varied and diverse, you see things from industries all over that can affect your
So,
personal life and business. So
but what's the dream? Where do you see Eriona going?
the dream is to be able to run multiple businesses on the least amount of time required from me so I can repurpose that into creating amazing experiences for myself and my family.
I love that. Eriona, what a wonderful vision statement. So, listen, this has been a fantastic episode. And some people might have been worried that, oh my word, this is going to be about tech. I don't need to hear more about tech. But actually, it's been about human behavior.
Yeah.
It's been about human lessons. It's been about the life lessons that you've earned from being a child right the way through this journey. The sometimes uncomfortable nature of being in business with somebody else, whether they're family members or not.
Yeah.
And I truly appreciate the fact that you shared some quite vulnerable things about the realities of the family dynamic and
Mhm.
being sort of shaken in bed with, oh my god, we've got this client work to do,
Yeah.
and the I guess the difficulties of cutting off home and office when you have that kind of dynamic. You've talked about the power of community. That's something that's come through loud and clear, whether it's conferences, social media platforms, or indeed the ACCA. And whilst you mentioned about the way that you presented the vision, what the thing that was really insightful for me was not just that you said that you articulated the vision really well at the start, which it sounds like you did. You certainly set out the stall of this is what we're doing, but also with reflection, that communication and articulation is something that can always be improved. And
Yeah.
it's something that all too often in change processes, we underestimate just how much we need to reinforce these messages, how strong and compelling we need to make the vision, and also to understand just very simply the different mindsets between those who see the future
Mm.
and those who perhaps see the past. Eriona, this has been a wonderful, wonderful episode. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I've absolutely loved it.